Hi, folks. On today's show, Jessica talks to Alison Pill about the nomination of Robert Francis Kennedy Jr. to lead the Department of Health and Human Services.
And I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicines.
In the last half of the episode, the two will talk about pronatalism and how concerns about fertility aren't as easy as they seem.
There's a lot of people who want to come here, where I'm like, I don't know that we need to be worried, but we do because white women aren't having enough babies, as always.
Right. 1,000%.
And with that, let's get started.
Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm Jessica Wilson, your registered dietitian with a lot of sass to share. Today's conversation will reference my interview with Jeff Hutt, spokesperson for the Make America Healthy Again Super PAC. Honestly, if I hadn't talked to Jeff and heard the origins and motivations behind Make America Healthy Again, or MAHA, there might be maybe 1% of me that believed that the talking points came from a truly altruistic place and weren't just talking points to elect the next president. The follow-up episode to my interview with Jeff came out on October 31st. You might find those two helpful as a primer to this episode. Either way, I'm sure you'll enjoy this conversation. Alison Pill is a proud Canadian actress known in part for her roles in Scott Pilgrim and Star Trek Picard. She's appeared in movies, television, on stage, and you can soon catch her as the voice of Farmer Faye in Robo-Gobo on Disney Junior. Alison is appearing in the romcom Young Werther, out December 13th in select theaters, digital and on demand. Alison, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so very much, Jessica.
I will tell the folks that you and I were chatting yesterday and simply inspired to chat about what is happening. Yesterday, RFK Jr. was nominated to be Secretary of HHS, which is, was an option that I didn't think would come through, but I really should have listened to Jeff Hutt, who was telling me that the evangelicals who got Trump into the White House were repaid in spades, and that perhaps RFK Jr. would be as well.
And I think in the midst of all of these possible cabinet appointments, confirmed or unconfirmed, whether people remain acting or not, it's an interesting mix of sort of loyalists and also people with seemingly very conflicting agendas.
Mm-hmm.
Not only with each other, but within themselves. And in listening to the conversation with Jeff and the reflections on it, it just comes down for me to these questions of, okay, we share these values of clean air, clean water, safe foods, more access to fresh foods, dealing with grocery prices, accessibility in neighborhoods that don't have grocery stores. Okay, This is all in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally do not see how, and have not heard it explained to me, how an extreme deregulatory agenda jibes with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I am deeply confused. And this is not to say that every political party doesn't contain hypocrisy and every political view. Of course it does. Like we all deal with this within ourselves in sort of ways we parse. But I really do not understand how you get to cleaner air, water, soil regenerative practices without regulation.
Yes, with doing away with the EPA. With, cutting how many employees from NIH and FDA? Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm very unclear with that.
Yeah. And this is not to say that there aren't levels of bureaucracy that probably could be streamlined. I think that's probably true,
Always.
And it is a big, mammoth ship to try to turn any of these departments.
Mm-hmm.
But my concern lies with how we get from the conversation that you had with Jeff to actual policies that do anything to work towards those seemingly shared goals. Like within a libertarian mindset, I don't understand how then you also, is it just because corporations are secretly good at this? And also the weird anti-corporate at the same time as being
at the same time. Mm-hmm.
At the same time, anti-corporate capture.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there can be no corporate capture if there is no FDA or
I
EPA.
love this, right? If there is no research to fund without, say, an NIH. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see this.
What are your feelings about seeing RFK Jr. in this position?
I think he might be confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
And per what Jeff was saying about RFK's interest in doing that type of hard work, I am certainly curious about what that means. In additional podcasts that I have not said on the show, Dr. Callie Means, whose sister is Dr. Casey Means, got into the specifics of what he is concerned about, his 3 major nutrition concerns: sugar in all of the ways, refined grains, and seed oils, particularly in ultra-processed foods. I'm like, oh, okay. So what you're saying is like processed foods, refined grains, and sugar. How is that any different than what the dietary guidelines has been saying? Like, all of these fancy ways to repackage information to not actually change outcomes for Americans and like nutrition and health is what it's bringing to mind without any regulation to make sure these changes actually happen.
Right. I mean, is it increasing the price of sugar, or the price of grains, or getting rid of some of the agricultural subsidies to corn, in which case could be interesting. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, if that's your goal and you want a more varied crop life than simply corn, what government structures put that into place? And I mean, what does that do to farmers without government support in the midst of a seemingly massive transition of an entire industry? Also, just to say, I was seeing, and this is unconfirmed, but that Cassie Means could be the new head of the FDA. I was reading some of the blog posts on her website, one of which was all about wheat.
Tell me more.
I mean, it went into, there are so many pieces of it that she spoke about her time as a surgical resident and how she was suffering from IBS and all these digestive issues because of lack of sleep, stress, and the inability to eat seated normal hours, like all of the things. Yeah. Which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that sounds normal.
If you're stressed and you're not sleeping and you're just kind of scarfing food whenever you can, as available in terms of time, which is the experience of most doctors that I know and most
residents especially.
Yeah, residents especially. But I mean, it is a lot of working people that do not have a consistent daily schedule.
Right.
That allows for meal breaks at regular intervals.
Right.
And, the importance of sleep, the importance of like feeding your microbiome and all these ways that your brain is affected. But then it comes down to basically people are depressed because they eat wheat.
Is that it?
I mean, but it goes through all of these things. And it's like, of course, all of these are factors in terms of sleep, getting into nature, stress level, the 17 things she lists. And then on top of it, it's the wheat. And I'm like, well, okay, policy wise, to me, it seems more important to deal with like the structures involved in getting people regular meal breaks, regular work schedules to depend on, that therefore allow them to drop their kids off at school or get them ready for the school bus or whatever, and then lead a life outside of their workplace in order to get outside. And the idea that you could divest from a surgical residency and lead a happier, healthier life is marvelous. But if you for instance, work in an Amazon warehouse,
Sure.
you can divest from that harsh work environment to go where, I guess, is my question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think for the person working in the Amazon warehouse whose pee breaks are,
Timed.
timed, that person eating less wheat.
For example. Mm-hmm.
For example,
Mm-hmm.
is going to lead to a super big impact in their overall health.
Mm-hmm.
That's my person. I'm not a doctor.
It's weird. Like maybe it's just a thought that I'm having. Yeah.
The thought that I'm having
Mm-hmm.
that maybe the wheat thins that person grabbed with some cheese as a snack might not be the biggest issue facing our lifestyles. And to both take into account the big things, but then come down to a policy position that's like, it's wheat.
Yeah.
Just,
And what does that mean?
what does that mean?
Well, the wheat is, I'm glad you found that one because the refined grains as well. When I listen to all these people talk, it's like in Europe, they don't have like color X, Y, or Z or additive, da, 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 da. And they're so much healthier there. And I'm like, how much wheat are they eating over there? Like, I don't understand where you're doing this. And then another place, Japan, always Japanese kids, this and that, adults. I'm like, so white rice is a refined grain. So like where is the disconnect between people? Is it the narrative that say she is, writing about how hard her life was as somebody who will be making tons of money, that then I believe that wheat is the issue? I don't understand.
I don't either. And this is where it worries me in terms of the kind of conclusions being drawn, because a lot of the problems seem too big to fix.
Yeah.
Because it is societal level change.
Right.
That's actually required. If we want people to get more sleep, we need to make that possible for people.
Yes. You also were mentioning working conditions, and I'm like, oh, so union organizing would also be a great thing. And let's talk about your plans for unionized workers. So overall, I'm like, it can't be about people's understanding of wheat, and it can't be about these narratives, because I do feel that most people are smarter. I don't know.
But I think I believe that most people want the easy answer, and it's why the repackaging of diets is the easiest thing to do. It puts it back on the individual and deals kind of with the societal level stuff of we're not going to subsidize wheat and corn. I mean, okay, that's the majority of calories the world over that people get.
And crops that farmers are growing.
Exactly. That would be a significant change that would probably increase food prices, increase hunger, and therefore increase sleeplessness and stress. So whatever payoff there might be. And again, I am not against the discussion of how agricultural subsidies are working and how ConAgra and Tyson Food, that all of these massive agricultural companies work. I am all about that conversation. However, again, I come back to how you have that conversation at the same time as you are interested in a deregulatory environment that more extreme than Reagan's.
Yes. Something that I saw this morning, because I've started, I wouldn't say trolling Dr. Mark Hyman after he introduced himself to me, but I would say, just following him on social media. And his post about our clothing and how, microplastics and endocrine disruptors are in, all of the clothing, and also our detergents. So, make sure that you're only buying, ones without flavors or scents or all of these things. Make sure you're not buying clothes with any vinyl or nylon or elastic anything. So I thought that every comment, I usually don't look at his comments because I'm like, sure, this is just like a cheering section. But somebody was like, okay, cool. So how do I not do this? And somebody was like, well, you can buy cashmere and, merino wool and silk. Easy. Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Somebody else was like, and how do you get a bra out of all of those things that actually supports boobs? And it's fascinating. It's just so obvious to me about who is being spoken to.
Yes.
And I don't,
because
it's
it is
weird.
like the person heading up this agency is the type of person who can walk away from a surgical residency and still be able to apparently support herself and a very nice lifestyle that includes outdoor time, healthy food at the times she's hungry. And that's wonderful. It's not that I don't want that for people, but that is not accessible to even wealthy-ish people.
Agree.
Just to have spent that much money on medical school and then, sort of pivot to a consultant, author stance that actually makes you a living is not something that most people can do.
No.
And I get concerned I know you were talking about this with Wilson, like get concerned about the place of science and expertise, which is such a, having to have several conversations at once is obviously difficult for people. In that, in that the studies that overall studies on diet and different populations, like obviously there's underrepresentation in most studies done or skewed data that's kind of crummy, and, like there are problems with the data we have on a lot of things.
Right.
At the same time, and many of those systems need to be changed and different things need to be funded. All of those things can be true at the same time as we expect some level of expertise.
What do you think of RFK Jr. as Secretary of HHS, especially as someone who's a parent?
It brings up, there is so much to discuss in terms of bodily and medical autonomy.
Okay.
That feel worthy of discussion in terms of trans healthcare as a matter of bodily autonomy and medical autonomy, of abortion and reproductive care as a matter of bodily autonomy, medical autonomy. The vaccine question is a tricky one because I would like to be able to draw a direct line. It is a difficult argument to make to say you have to give up your medical and bodily autonomy because otherwise you could kill me versus someone getting the health care they need, which I'm not going to die if somebody takes some tea, as far as I know. As far as in my experience. And at the same time, I hold like some level of understanding of being a scared parent who doesn't want to do something wrong.
Yeah.
I love vaccines. Personally, I'm very grateful that we don't have a lot of diseases that used to really fuck up a lot of kids.
Right.
Like
forever. Also.
Forever. Yeah. And I love that my child has protection from these very serious illnesses like mumps, measles, and rubella. I'm very grateful that we both have protection from that. And I would wish that protection on our society as a whole. The fact that may be going out the window, and I haven't quite grasped how to feel about that because it is deeply concerning and makes me even more concerned because a lot of people may at the same time as that, be losing access to Medicaid and Medicare. And what the heck are we going to do with the next mumps outbreak?
Right.
That I don't wish that upon people. And I don't know how we succeed in agreeing upon kind of best societal practices at this point. And I'm also frustrated by somebody speaking so much about medical and bodily autonomy and not attending to what feel to me like bigger questions of that than getting a shot that you don't want to get. But at the same time, I don't want to minimize people's concerns and having this sort of philosophical debate about what individuals need to do for society. I mean, I just don't know what happens if kids and their germs are all up in each other's business all the time. And I just think about like a nursery school kid who like suddenly they're partially vaccinated. And then somebody's not at all. And like how you negotiate any of that. I guess it doesn't matter because Head Start won't exist for much longer. So.
Yeah, I've thought about that too, for sure.
And this is where I mean about like where the hypocrisies lie or seemingly lie, where I can see a through line in my argument for what I consider to be bodily autonomy. But I guess I would like to be having that discussion with the people for whom it's such a huge issue.
Yeah. I like that.
You know, of like, okay, then have the discussion with me about abortion and trans healthcare, because those to me, if you are going into the HHS with that goal in mind overall, then I'm going to need you to speak to these seemingly very related issues.
Yes, perhaps. The fluoride in your water and the mercury in your vaccines is just something that seems very old to me. And I think it's probably consistent with RFK Jr., you know, talking about when he was a child. But Alison, let me tell you, my dad has had fluoridated water his entire life, and he will talk to you for a half hour about why that's a good thing. I remember going to Oregon and not having gone to the dentist for years because I was in my 20s and didn't have money for it. Finally getting insurance, opening my mouth on that chair, and the dentist saying, "Oh, so you have California teeth." And I was like, "Oh, yes, I have had fluoridated water as opposed to Oregon, who has not." He was like, "Yeah, it's fine that you haven't gone to the dentist in years. This is not the mouth that I usually see." And I'm like, okay. Yeah, which is good. I mean, good for me, but not good for everyone else in Oregon who was losing teeth and having cavities.
I'm also just like, I'm way more concerned about lead in water than I am about fluoride.
Right.
You know,
that's like, a really good point.
There's things in water that I would focus on real quick. You know, like we have very good evidence about lead in water. It is like everybody agrees. Don't drink lead.
Right. Easy.
Don't eat lead paint. Don't like. Right. We have a lot of stuff, and the fact that a lot of communities have high levels of lead seems like a massive public health emergency to me in terms of what we know as long-term effects that are incredibly well documented and what I would consider to be a true emergency of public health.
Right.
We've had fluoride for decades. I feel fine.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
Also, I'm fine.
Yeah. And many of the people I know who also drink like it. Yeah. Far more. There's just a level of, you know, it is. And this is where my frustration hits most heavily is, okay, it is one thing to share values, apparently, on clean air and water. And where policy comes into play is how we address those. And that's actually a really important piece in terms of what we are valuing most. And fluoride in the water and removing vaccine requirements are not at the top of my public health list.
And I don't think it is at the top of most people's list. Like if you were to give a list of 10 things,
Yeah.
I feel like people would be far more concerned with because let's not assume, with like lead in water, with access to, fruits and vegetables, to all of these things that both require money and attention and, will just not be getting it. So how do over 50% of voters choose someone? It's fascinating to me. Maybe it's predictable and fascinating at the same time.
I think that's fair.
And something else that I find interesting about the Elon, the Trump, and the RFK Jr. of it all is they used to be Democrats. You're right. And which gets me into the men of it all. You and I were chatting a bit earlier about how people are talking about the right to wellness influencer raw milk pipeline, and how that makes sense. And all of the conversations about it are white women wellness influencers. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I love those analyses. And I was thinking like, there has to be something more simple. And I'm like, where is, again, the men of it all? And are men just pulling the strings over and over and just figuring out a way to do it and make it sound different? So white women are just like an extension of those values. Because I feel like white women are really good at like policing each other, mm-hmm. And like setting the bar for womanhood. And yeah, I mean, that's like says patriarchy and capitalism, and then also the neoliberalism of the like people who are just using this to make money, who have figured out that they themselves as white men, like if they're like enforcing these values on white women, they'll just make protein powder and sell it. But I don't know.
It is this constant frustration to see all of what you just spoke about and just the very age-old nature of it.
Yeah.
Which is just essentially forcing women into traditional roles to mm-hmm. salvage the male traditional role. Mm-hmm. And it is currently, I believe, being dressed up in a lot of the same ways that, second wave feminism did.
Yeah.
I mean, even third wave, it's just a very specifically affluent white woman mm-hmm. thing, which is also like the suffragettes, which is also like all of these things, it's like not new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was my dad, partially my dad got me thinking about it, how the 60s and 70s felt so different to him. Mm-hmm. Right. Than the whiplash and the backlash, and how, yes, white women were feeling like liberated or what. So like, we can't have this happen. How do we fix this? And how do we have them police everyone else? And they're doing so. And which has been like to the 80s to now, which makes sense because Reagan and then Bush, like, I think it's simple, but also it can be very nuanced. And I think it can be easy to see.
I agree. And I think a lot of the fear mongering that's been happening in terms of population and like the pronatalist movement and everything else is absolutely part of that in terms of not being able to reimagine an immigration system that if we need more people mm-hmm. because we're worried about our population taking a dive, mm-hmm. there's a lot of people who want to come here, where I'm like, I don't know that we need to be worried about, but we do because white women aren't having enough babies as
right.
Like,
1000%. That's fantastic. And when I see the concerns about reduction in fertility, and I'll put that in quotation marks, I've deep dived that one, and it comes back to birth rate, and it's like, yes, I'm like, is it fertility or just kids are fucking expensive and they have a lot of germs and I'm tired. I don't want them. And if I need an abortion, I can't get one. This isn't fertility. What you're, talking about is
what you're describing is having made it a choice, people are choosing and you mm-hmm. don't like their choice.
Right.
And the idea that women are sad because of it, glosses over, like this is the ultimate, in the same way that I think wheat is causing depression, mm-hmm. not enough babies is also causing depression and anxiety.
Yes, nice one.
And listen, if the policies they are going for, again, lend itself to a single income household being able to support multiple kids.
Great.
Okay. Yeah.
That sounds good.
People are getting enough sleep.
Yeah. Sorry, let me add that back into one of the reasons people don't want to have children. It does not look good on all of you. You don't look happy. It doesn't look great.
Right. Yeah. Where you're like, okay, I mean, in that case, and it can remain a choice. Sure. Have at that policy proposal. I
1000%.
can't wait to read it. If you just want me to have another baby because I'm white, I don't know that that's a reason to go on ahead with that.
Right. That one I hadn't honestly put together, and that's fantastic. The need for white women to have more babies. Again, easy, right? I feel like we're missing the easy through the great details that are harder to pull together.
Because I think back to, Sabrina Strings' work specifically about the slightly athletic, thin white woman body. Like vaguely athletic, like not, you need to at least have some access to the outdoors.
Sure.
Yeah. And how that is very much back. Not that it ever went away, but that its centrality is here, and how that is always inevitably linked to fertility, and how chronic diseases and fatness is also always linked to fertility. In the end, like a lot of, you know what I mean? Like it's...
Yeah, I do. I am like rereading all of those in my head. Yes. Yeah, it's a great point.
But maybe, listen, maybe we all get nice soil.
Well, crop variety.
But but like, again, I'm all for it. I would love nothing more.
Same. Clean water. Like
clean water, really nice Broncos in the store. You know what I mean?
Yes. More than one variety.
I go to Target and it's very like often I'm like, you are right on the edge. Vegetables. Like you are not healing. You were about 5 days ago.
And I'm still going to buy you. Because you know what? The alternative is me not eating them. I'll just try to eat them faster.
Exactly. You got to cook this tonight, Honestly, air fryers in every household, because I don't know how people cook vegetables without their air fryers. I know I would.
Title of the episode, Air Fryers for Everyone. But that goes back to like you and cooking for a family, right? And time and energy and like having a job. Yeah. Air fryers for everyone.
Air fryers for everyone. You can kind of like get a good char on veggies in like 10 minutes.
Yep. Makes frozen ones like, perk up.
If you want to start like some sort of CSA program, and just like deliver boxes of fresh food every week to people. Yeah.
That sounds great.
Along with your government legislated air fryer. I think we could start a real turnaround.
Yes. Let me tell you the number of times rutabagas and butternut squash have been offered to my patients. And they're like, what? Where do you? What? But you know what? You can put those things, air fryer, Instant Pot.
Yeah, I made the weirdest butternut squash soup the other day.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. We ended up making it work. Kiddo decided that it needed lentils to kind of like it. I put a whole can of coconut milk in it. Okay. It was too much. It was too much. Okay. And it was sort of like a weird coconut dessert at a certain point.
Oh, nice. I love it.
Like a curried
you know who would approve of that? Because it probably didn't have sugar for dessert. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But is butternut squash too sugary? Or do we
shit.
not count that sugar?
Damn. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good
It's
point.
a pretty sweet vegetable. I'm like, are we allowed carrots? Those little guys are sweet.
I don't know. Sweet bell peppers versus the other ones. I don't know.
Oh, get out of here with your green peppers.
Same.
I mean, not to yuck the yum, but please.
Along with our questions about vaccines, fluoridated water, we also want to know about butternut squash and carrots.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Alison, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me. Always happy to discuss all of the myriad ways these things connect and overlap and confuse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might be a regular political correspondent now for this podcast. Get ready with our blazers and other things that we'll need.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I got to get a blazer.
For sure. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to Alison for coming back on the show. I look forward to having her in her best blazer alongside additional correspondents like my dad in the future. I've been Jessica Wilson and, it's me dropping in post-production again. Dr. Oz might be the one to head our Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And the announcement on Truth Social was the first thing that I've ever read on that platform. It said he'll work closely with RFK and take on the illness industrial complex and all of this country's chronic diseases. More to continue discussing, of course, but I will be watching to see how Dr. Oz's second trip to Congress will be. I watched him getting hauled to the floor the first time for his claims of miracle medical weight loss, and I'll be watching again. Now I'm waiting to see which position Jillian Michaels will be offered. And with that,
You have been listening to Making It Awkward. You can leave an Apple Podcast review or a comment on YouTube or Spotify. And she will read them on the show.
Nope.
I will read them on the show?
Yeah.
Okay. You can join the podcast Patreon for announcements and behind the scene comments. Sorry, this is falling apart, people. This show is edited by Jen Jacobs, who goes wild on editing. And it is a production of the Body Politics and support by Sacramento Outward Service.
Legacy.
Legacy. Oh, was that good enough? Because she edited
That was perfect.